Welcome back to another edition of the Beers and Pigskins College Football Podcast. We are back this week. What week is it? I believe it's week 7. So we're just about at that halfway point of the college football season. I think we've said this before, but I can't even believe that we're halfway through already. We've got a little bit of a special show. We're actually not together recording for the first time. Mason over here had to go out and get laryngitis or whatever he's got going on. And so you may hear that in his voice a little bit. We'll try not to make too much fun of him. From what I've heard, it's been getting a little bit better as the week has gone on, so it's not as bad as it was. But Mason, how are we feeling over there?
Yeah, no, definitely not been a normal week for myself, but glad that we're still able to make this work. And I think the bright side of the whole sickness, voice being lost situation is it's forcing us to use technology a little bit. And hopefully, if everything goes well, we'll actually not only be able to release the audio version here, but also upload. We're recording over Google Meet right now, so hopefully we'll be able to put this on the YouTube channel, and this might actually be somewhat of a staple going forward. That also limits your need to travel down to my house as well.
Yeah, two things on that. One, it seems like we need like the least amount of technology involved because that seems to hold us back quite a bit. It takes us a while to figure out things. And two, I mean, you got that like it doesn't sound that bad. It's just like you got like the lower like raspiness, tone to you
Yeah,
now. I think that's all that it sounds like is like you just got a little bit of a head cold or whatever.
I could be a blues singer.
Exactly. Yeah.
Be a little Louis Armstrong.
Exactly. So, kind of jumping into this week, I think what we're gonna do is we saw a couple things that we want to kind of touch on real quick. But as it is pretty much the midpoint of the season, if you've been listening and going along with us throughout the season, we did make some predictions at the beginning of the year. For better or for worse. I know that both of us kind of at least have one prediction in there that has kind of gone sideways. But we're going to kind of go through that, review those real quick, and then also kind of give our midseason, for the rest of the year predictions, for the college football playoff and for the Heisman watch. And then I think there's just one big game that we wanted to cover. There are a few that are bigger matchups. We've got some top 25 games going on, but we do have that Oregon-Washington game coming up, which should be very, very fun, very, very interesting. So we're going to touch on that a little bit. But the first thing that I think we want to get into, which, if I recall correctly, I think we both picked this wrong, actually, unfortunately, last week, which is the Red River rivalry, which I always have trouble saying. OU in Texas, and I personally watched the second half of that game and only the first 5 minutes of that first quarter. That first 5 minutes was just wild. It was insane. I think we saw 2 interceptions. We saw a block punt for a touchdown. Everything was just going sideways. The only thing I predicted right was you can't predict what goes on in that game. There's always stuff that you can never say with any degree of certainty that's going to happen. I mean, you can't predict all that in the first 5 minutes. So, what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think as we mentioned last week that this game is always crazy. No matter how well the teams are doing, it's typically always going to be a competitive game and be close at the end, other than last year's contest. Unfortunately, I didn't get to watch a lot of the game. I did watch the highlights. I was out of town for the weekend and tending to some family stuff. But from what I saw, like you said, the first few minutes was wild, was kind of the first highlights that I was seeing with the interceptions, block punt, everything that was going on. But yeah, OU squeaked it out. And I kind of touched on it last week. I said if OU wins this game, I don't see a Big 12 team making it to the playoff. I think they're just going to run into end up beating each other later on in the season, or OU's going to drop a game somewhere else. I just haven't seen the consistency yet across the board for them. So I'm going to be interested to see where that tails off here in a few weeks leading up. And if Texas bounces back, as Texas gets to, say, the Big 12 championship with one loss and they end up, say, beating OU or beat somebody else, is that going to be enough for the committee to put them in? So I think it just kind of makes an interesting storyline in the Big 12. But yeah, I think 34-30 ended up being a great score for that game and another one for the history books.
Yeah, just a couple things on that. You kind of touched on it. Will it be enough? I think if Texas goes in there and let's say Texas wins the Big 12 championship, if that's what it is at the end of the season, I just don't think the Big 12 is good enough, or B, they play enough competition. They both really wouldn't have played enough competition. Yes, Texas played Alabama, but they're not Alabama. And I think they just have a potential to beat up on each other a little bit too much to be able to have one of them go unscathed into the college football playoff. And I'm kind of with you, even with them winning and beating Texas, I don't know. I just don't have the supreme confidence. Yes, of course I have more confidence in them now that they've won and they beat still a very good Texas team. I don't know. I could just very well see them against I don't even know what the rest of their schedule looks like, but like a Kansas State, a Kansas. I think they still have Kansas yet to play. Just slipping up and kind of underestimating, because honestly, the rest of their schedule is not hard. It's the Big 12 is not good.
And I think that's what makes it really interesting. The first college football playoff polls come out at the end of October. Right now, Oklahoma, after beating Texas, the AP ranking has them at 5, which is ahead of both three undefeated Penn State, Washington, and Oregon. I think, let's say all those teams go undefeated between, obviously Oregon and Washington can't. One of them will have a loss. But whoever wins out that game, right? I think it's going to be really interesting to see, and we'll kind of understand how the committee views Oklahoma in the Big 12 competition versus the Pac-12 competition come October 31st when that first poll comes out, just based on kind of because Pac-12 offenses right now have just been unbelievable. They've been playing so well. And you look at the competition, I'd say it's looked a little bit better than Big 12 overall. And so it's going to be interesting if OU shows up, 9-0 or whatever come October 31st. Are they still going to have them ranked above those undefeated, even Penn State or Pac-12 teams? Or are they going to put them behind? I think that's going to give us a better sentiment going forward of how they view the conference.
Yeah. I totally agree there, but honestly, I'm a person that has the view of like right now, it doesn't matter where you are.
Mm-hmm.
Just win your games. It does not matter. We saw when the college football playoff just first started, Ohio State started, what were they, 18 or 20, and ended up making the playoff and winning the whole thing. So it's just, go out there, win your games. You will end up where you need to be in the end. And so just to touch on the game a little bit, I think it really just came down to Texas made some, and I hate to put it this way, but mainly Quinn Ewers, just you can't turn the ball over. It was really just the difference in the game. Texas had 3 turnovers. OU took great care of the ball, had no turnovers. They did have that one block punt that resulted in a touchdown for Texas, but besides that, they played a really clean game. Dylan Gabriel played an amazing game, probably the best one that we've seen him play. Which is saying something because, he's always been a solid quarterback, but he just looked like he took kind of the next step there. But I just feel like I just feel that, Texas will probably win out and be the second best team in the Big 12, and they'll just want to at least get a little bit back on the season as they're leaving the Big 12. They'll want to kind of get that, one notch over OU. Hey, you beat us during the year, but we took the Big 12,
Yeah.
kind of one of those things. So yeah, hats off to OU, and Brent Venables did play really, really well. They came out ready to play, and it was actually a very, very good game. It was a very, very good game. But moving on, and this is something that you put in there, so I'll kind of throw it over to you. Was Georgia, and I'll put it this way: it looks like they woke up a little bit. They were ready to go. I think both you and I thought it was going to be they'll win by what do we say, like 20,
Yeah.
24, something like that, maybe 17. But they came out there, they were ready to go. They put up some points, and also their defense was ready to stop that Kentucky offense.
Yeah, no, it's kind of what we've been asking for, is this Georgia team to show up, right? They needed to back up that number one ranking. They're however many games undefeated now in a row. I think it's like 19 or 18 or something like that, going back to a season and a half ago or whatever it is. And they kind of showed glimpses of it the previous week when they finally got Brock Bowers, involved in that last half there of that was the Auburn game. But man, they scored points on every single drive in the first half. Carson Beck looked the best that I'd seen him play all year. Brock Bowers, massive game, 7 for $130 or something in a touchdown. Like this is I think showing what that Georgia team is capable of, and it's no slouch of a Kentucky team. Kentucky typically year in year out is pretty physical on defense, and the fact that Georgia hung a 50 burger on them and made it look like it was nothing and held Ray Davis to what he was held to. I don't even know.
60 yards.
Yeah. What, 15 carries for 59 yards. And what I kind of talked about last week was the difference maker for Kentucky is Devin Leary going to be able to make the plays? And I didn't think he was there. He's not that kind of guy. I don't think you can rely on Ray Davis to, carry you to a victory against Georgia. It's just not in the cards, right? You're not going to beat Georgia on the ground over 4 quarters, putting up points that way. And so Carson Beck, 28 completions, almost 400 yards, 4 touchdowns. It's what you love to see from the number one team in the country. I think it's great momentum for them moving forward. Their schedule the next couple of weeks is a little bit lighter. They kind of got a walk in the park tomorrow with Vanderbilt. And then Florida and Missouri. Missouri is no slouch on offense. My team is well aware of that. Brady Cook and the Missouri offense is a top 10 offense in the country right now. They're playing really well. And then they close out the season, obviously with the rivalry game at Georgia Tech and then at Tennessee before that, which will be a tough match. But nonetheless, I think this is a great stepping stone for them into the latter half of their schedule. Conference-wise, playing a bunch of good offenses, because Missouri, Ole Miss, and Tennessee are probably going to put up the points. Defense is going to be good for Georgia, but I don't think you're going to shut out those teams. And so knowing that Carson Beck can put the team on his shoulders a little bit and make the throws, and the other receivers are stepping up across the board and they're utilizing Brock Bowers, it's good for them to know that, hey, there's a reason we're the Bulldogs. And so
I think the last 3 weeks we just kind of seen a Georgia team that they play like Georgia for about one half, but they just didn't really play the other half. And I mean, even against UAB, they didn't struggle against UAB. Don't get me wrong, but it was still, they went to the first. They went into the half up 28-14. I mean, it was just, by no means did they struggle, but it was like, it wasn't just a Georgia that we're used to seeing. They struggled in the first half against South Carolina, struggled in the first half against Auburn. And so it was just like, I'll say it was good to see them just kind of like put 2 halves together.
Yeah.
And what did it result in? It resulted in a 51-13 win against a top 20 team. I think Kentucky was right at 20. So completely dominant.
And
Super.
Kentucky was also undefeated. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
they were
Mhm.
coming off of a huge win against Florida. So
Yeah. So, good for Georgia. They'll definitely be looking to build off. They will be looking to build off of this. I'd hate to be Vandy this week. Don't want to get Georgia just feeling good and feeling like they can play free and do whatever they want, because that's a scary sight.
yeah, that's a train starting to pick up a lot of speed, and that's a train you don't want to step in front of.
No, not at all. You want that thing moving as slow as possible, but hopping over to midseason predictions.
Yes.
If I can pull this up real quick. I'll go first.
Okay.
I guess we can talk about just how everything's looking, and we'll just list it out what we thought at the beginning of the year and see how everything's looking at this point.
Okay.
So I had Georgia at 1, Michigan at 2 for the college football playoff at the end of the year. So Georgia at 1, Michigan at 2, Clemson at 3, and Washington at 4. Honestly, I don't hate it. I don't. Obviously, we whiffed on Clemson. Are they terrible? No, they're not.
I think they're young. I think there's promise there.
They don't look like a Clemson team that we've seen kind of show up in like the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Um,
It's hard when you have arguably back-to-back generational quarterbacks with Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah,
it's hard to keep that pace going.
It's tough. And when the expectations are just so high. And so we also know that Dabo isn't a huge fan or a fan at all of the transfer portal, and that may be something that needs to be reevaluated or changed, in years to come, because it has become a very, very valuable asset to teams, being able to bring new guys in, bare minimum for competition's sake, and then for its actual purpose. Actual purpose in filling in gaps where you going into a new year. So Clemson, I think for their future may need to kind of reevaluate their stance on that. I don't think they're on a actual downward progression, because they still play in the ACC, where it's still very top heavy with them and Florida State right now. Duke's having a good year. Just unfortunately had lost a close game to Notre Dame there, but yeah, kind of missed on that one. I did think that Clemson would have their bounce back year and be kind of in an easier conference. But as far Georgia, Michigan looking like still a good top 2 right now. Hasn't moved very much. And then as far as Washington goes, that's still very plausible, very, very much a possible scenario with them coming out of the Pac-12. It's going to be tough for them. Obviously, they've got maybe their biggest game of the season tomorrow against Oregon. That might be kind of a 1 versus 2 as far as the Pac-12 goes. But yeah, it'll be interesting. That offense has been as advertised, I think, as they were going into the year. Michael Penix has been great. And so I think I was a solid 3 for 4 at this point with that preseason prediction.
Okay. Do you have someone else that you like to potentially fill that spot down the line?
I mean, it's a super easy, like let's take out Clemson, replace them with Florida State. I'm not completely sold on Florida State. It very well could be, like we're talking about earlier, it could be OU if they just run out, go through the table. I was thinking about this the other day. Do I think it's going to happen? No. But let's say that Georgia
Hmm.
loses somewhere down the road, maybe they even just lose the SEC championship game. We see OU go 12-0 and win the conference. We see one of the top three teams in the Big Ten East go 12-0 and win the conference. We see Florida State go 12-0 and win the conference. And then maybe if somebody comes out of the Pac-12 unscathed, then they take care of business. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but there is a very small chance for there to be no SEC team in the college football playoff, because I just don't feel like there's an actual team to make the college football playoff behind Georgia and the SEC right now. I feel like the closest team there is Alabama, and I don't believe. I think they've turned it around from the start of the season, but I don't believe.
Yeah, no, it's not an offense I believe in. If you could just take like a no, I'm not even gonna go down that wishful road. No, I agree with a lot of that. And I'm not far off there with kind of my mid-season point of view as well. I got Georgia and Michigan as well right there, and I had them in my 2 and 3, and I think it's probably going to be pretty similar. Obviously undefeated, 13-0, whatever, 12-0 LSU is not going to happen. Kind of swallowed that pill real quick after week 1, obviously, but even playoff. You don't ever want to say something's completely mathematically impossible, but it is essentially mathematically impossible that they make the playoff with 2 losses. They were like the very first team ever to make the national championship with 2 losses in 2007, back when it was the BCS.
It's just nobody's done it yet in the college football playoff.
No,
and
there's no one's done it yet, and there is too many teams that are going to end up with, at a minimum, probably 1 loss.
Yeah.
And so it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Let's say somehow they put a beat down on Alabama and somehow smack the crap out of Georgia in the SEC championship. You can consider it at that point as, okay, maybe sliding into, depending on obviously what else happens around the country. But again, the odds of that happening are so slim. I am very happy with the way the offense is playing. Defense is just sickening, but nonetheless, they obviously will not be in it. I kind of, just the way things are vibing out, like I already talked about, I think OU somehow going to drop a game, or Texas will run the table and then come back and beat them in the conference championship. So I don't think the Big 12 there makes it. I'm actually going to put Florida State in mine, even though I hate saying that after losing week 1. But I think schedule-wise, I think it's pretty easy for them. Obviously, they're going to have possibly Duke. I don't know who they're going to end up playing. Maybe Louisville. Who knows? Who had an upset last week? They might end up
look real good. So they made Notre Dame look bad.
Yeah, I think just based on scheduling, I think Florida State has an easier chance of winning out if they can kind of piece together what they were able to piece together week 1. Or that's just going to show how bad the LSU defense was week 1. But I like their chances to go undefeated, and so I would squeeze them in possibly. I'm not convinced at all by Ohio State at this point, but I think they year in, year out find a way to win every game, potentially other than the Michigan game. So I think a 1 loss against Michigan potentially looks better than a 1 loss Texas and OU. And I think the whole Washington, Oregon, USC predicament, because I had USC, I think they're going to end up just beating each other all around. Like, I'm not convinced by USC's defense. They should have lost against Arizona State. Let's be real. And so I marked them off. They're probably going to find a way to go undefeated, but like I'm just not convinced by them at all. Washington and Oregon's defense has convinced me much more so than Washington so far.
Yeah.
I think, which we'll get into that matchup in here in a minute, but That conference is going to be a war of attrition. So I don't know. I think 3 weeks time from now we'll get a little bit better view, which is kind of a redundant thing to say, but even though it's midseason, I think there's still a lot of crazy cards on the table. So I'll kind of leave it at that.
The Pac-12 is for sure the most interesting conference this year. It's like it's not even close. I could talk every week about how bad that USC defense is. We talked about it last week. I'm not going to go into it this week. But 500 yards against Arizona's backup quarterback, that's bad.
Not good. Not a good look over there, Mr. Lincoln Riley. But got to get some stuff figured out, getting into, because they play Notre Dame this week, which is a game we've prefaced, the beginning of the season. So we'll see what that matchup turns into.
Yeah, but just going really quick into the Heisman finals, because I think that you and I probably at this point, who are looking at who our top three is moving forward, I think we pretty much have the same list here. At the beginning of the season, I had Caleb Williams, Michael Penix, and Marvin Harrison. You had Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, and Drake May. I think we both agree that we both went about 2 for 3 there in terms of who we think is going to be the kind of the top 3 at the end of the season. I think it's looking like Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, and Michael Penix for both of us. Just because I said him at the beginning of the year, I'm going to still keep going with Michael Penix. I think he's just set up for such a great season. He's set up for success there. The dude can absolutely sling the ball around everywhere. Obviously, Caleb Williams is Caleb Williams, and he may even be having a better season than he was last year. But just for the sake of having somebody different win it, I'm definitely gonna be putting my money, hypothetically,
okay,
on Michael Penix. But getting on to the topic of Jaden Daniels, it's hilarious because week 1 you're like, no, absolutely not. Jaden Daniels is not the guy. And ever since then, he has 100% played like a Heisman quarterback. It's just unfortunate that he's on a team that's not going to get him there. He's on an offense and he's propelling that offense, but that defense will just not take him. And it's unfortunate because, Heisman candidates, their teams win. They're top teams as well. You're not going to see an 8-4. I'm not saying LSU's going to go 8-4, but you also got to win games to, the Heisman. And it's just unfortunate that there's such a difference in between how their offense is playing and how their defense is playing.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I have the same 3 guys kind of in my picture going forward. This will be my bold prediction as I'm hopping back on the wagon. If production wise at the same rate throughout the rest of the season, and LSU wins out, they go 10-2, beat Alabama, beat A&M, beat everybody there at the end, and he keeps up the same pace. Because right now, he's only 30 passing yards behind, but if you look at total yardage rushing as well, he is number 1 in the country. As well as, he's 19 touchdowns to 2 interceptions, another 400 something yards on the ground and 5 rushing, whatever it is. He's beating both Penix and Williams outright, total yardage and touchdowns. If he continues on the pace and they win out and they go 10-2, I don't know if that ends up putting them in the SEC championship, whatever it may be. I think he wins the Heisman. I think it's too good of a season to ignore. And 10-2 is no sweat to kind of just brush off, because I do think USC is probably going to drop a game and think like last year Caleb Williams won it, and USC was. They might not have been 8-4, but I believe they were at least 9-3.
USC?
Yeah.
Oh no, they were in the college football playoff discussion. I think they lost the Pac-12 championship, and that's what pushed them out. I think I remember that correctly because that's how Ohio State got in, and Ohio State didn't even go to the Big Ten championship, and they still got in.
I could have swore they lost 3 games. They did lose 3 games. I mean, after the bowl
They
game,
lost. They lost to Utah.
Yeah. So okay, he was 10-2 or whatever going, or 11-2 after the conference championship, going into the bowl game. So I mean, 2 losses. Again, that could potentially put them in the conference championship. I think it's too good. He's, to me, proving that he is a much better quarterback than I gave him credit for. Again, Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas right now, statistically, and just from what I'm seeing, are the best. You're not going to blow the top off with speed, but they're the best duo across football right now. Both coming in, getting 130 plus yards a game and usually multiple touchdowns. So it's just fun to watch. Again, it's a shame that the defense is so bad, letting up just about the exact same amount of yards on the other side of the ball. But yeah, I'm gonna put my eggs in his basket for him and support him down the stretch here. But yeah, other than that, it's probably going to be a repeat. Let's be real. But anyway, just the way the committee likes to vote on things. All right. Well, that'll lead us into the one, like we said, there's a couple matchups, but the big headliner of the week, obviously, the third, I think, best matchup so far this season. We've kind of talked about them hand in hand. We had week 1, 5-8 with LSU Florida State. Then 3 weeks ago now, the Notre Dame OSU, which was, I don't know, like 5-7 or close to that. Another super high ranked matchup. Yeah. And now we got 7-8. We got good old Oregon Ducks and the Washington Huskies battling it out for top of the Pac-12. This is definitely going to be a huge momentum. Right now, Seattle's a 3-point favorite. What are your initial thoughts on this game?
Did you just say Seattle is a 3-point favorite?
Games in Seattle. I was reading the location. Washington, they play in Seattle at Husky Stadium. Washington.
The Seahawks are a 3-point favorite in this game. Yeah, so I can't go back on what I've said. I'll say first off, Oregon for sure has their defense has shown a lot more and has been a lot more consistent. They had their game when all the hype in the world went into Eugene with Colorado, and this has been my new favorite term this college football season. They boat raced Colorado. Yeah. It was not close, and yes, the offense put up 42, but I think really the reason was that they just shut down that Colorado offense. They allowed them to have 6, and that was in the fourth quarter. It was late in the game when they probably, really took their foot off the gas. Their defense has looked very good, I think, except for like one game against Tech. They let up 30. But, Tech is no slouch. Maybe I'm just saying that to make myself feel better about them beating my Bears 39-14 last weekend. But yes, their defense has been very, very formidable. They've let up only 6 points in the last 2 weeks. However, with that being said, I think that this is the game that if Michael Penix wants to win the Heisman, this is the game where he's had a great season. 100% had a great season. He needs to have those same kind of numbers in this game. Caleb Williams is doing Caleb Williams things. He has to in order to overcome that defense, and he's got to put up a ton of points. So he's doing his thing at USC. Michael Penix, I think he knows it. Everybody else knows it. He needs to go out there and absolutely go crazy. I think this is going to be a very high scoring game. I say very high scoring. I can I can very much see like it's like a 41-38, so right on that line. So 41-35. I think there's going to be quite a few touchdowns. The Washington defense, they're not bad by any means. They let up an average of just over 350 yards a game. And they're going to go up against the best offense they've seen this year. And so I think the reason that Washington will win is if their defense can really kind of step up to the challenge and really have their best game of the season. But I think that's with the given that Michael Penix is going to put up the numbers that he's been putting up. So yes, he needs to do that, but I think Washington will win if their defense has a great game. Because even though that Oregon is playing really well on the defensive side of the ball and on offense, I think Michael Penix and that Washington offense is good enough to kind of still do what they want. I could very well be proven wrong, for sure, but I believe in that Washington offense. I think they can air that ball out as much as they want to. I think they're going to take much better care of their quarterback than Colorado's offensive line did and has done this season. And so I think there's going to be lots of touchdowns. Like I said, 41-35. Like I said earlier in the podcast, they're my team to kind of make it in third or fourth seed to the college football playoff. I've liked them the whole season. Played an okay game against Arizona, kind of a tight one. I think they come back. I think they're playing great. I think they take it this week. It'll be a really good game to watch.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to watch this one. I have so many thoughts racing through my head about how this game is going to go because there's part of me that it really feels it could go either way, for a multitude of reasons. Part of me is thinking one, obviously quarterback play, right? Those are the two big glaring things. Everyone talks about Michael Penix, and it's kind of not being talked about how well Bo Nix has been playing and how efficient this offense has been. And I think experience is a really big thing when it comes to college football. And Bo Nix has really been, since being at Auburn, has been thrown into the big game situations and been in the limelight, been in the tough road environments, especially in the SEC. Michael Penix really kind of blossomed last year for the most part, but no one was, I don't think I would say, considering Washington as this formidable contender for the playoff and like going to be this national crazy good team. This is the first year, I think, since they've been in the playoff like years ago, that they've kind of stepped back up on that stage. And so I think this is going to be the first big matchup for Penix and like what he's truly made of. So I'm curious to see how his nerves play out and how settled he gets. I think there's a few different key matchups to look for in this game. One of them is the physical nature, the physicality difference in Washington versus Oregon. If you look at the receiving core on both sides of the ball, Washington is big dudes, 6'2", 6'3", 205, 220, all big, fast guys that play physical press, getting off the line kind of receivers, whereas Oregon's got itty-bitty guys, speedsters, right? And so if the Washington DBs can play physical press and force Oregon into a different game plan, I think that's really going to help dictate the pace of this game. Whereas I think Washington's going to kind of have their way on offense. They're not a run team. They throw to maybe run the ball. And so I think we're probably going to see 40-plus attempts from both quarterbacks. But I think if Oregon can dominate the clock and run the ball, they are more successful on the ground than Washington. I think Irving is their running back. He's a very solid back, almost averaging 8 yards a carry. And they can slow down you basically, control the time of possession against
Mhm.
Washington.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be the key for Oregon to win this game. But I think somehow, I think they're going to win this game, Washington. So I am going to kind of side with you on that. But I wouldn't be surprised if Oregon manages the game really well. Bo Nix, like I mentioned in this environment before, they're able to run the ball a lot more efficiently than Washington. So I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of come out and shock some people with how well they play against Washington.
Yeah, out of both teams, Washington 100%, I think, relies on scoring a lot more points, and they want that game to be super fast. They want those big hitters. And I'll compare it a little bit to Michigan and Ohio State the last couple of years. Really, the reason that Michigan's, I'd say this, and they had a lot of big touchdowns, big yardage touchdowns last year against Ohio State, but it's making the game as short as possible.
Yeah.
And allowing your run game and your defense to not let them score fast. You just you continue to bend, you just don't break. And then you allow your offense to hold the ball, and if you can limit their points, a team who relies on scoring a lot more points quickly, if you can just do everything in your power to kind of take 10 to 14 points off of the expected amount that they want to get to, that counts so much towards your offense being able to go out there and kind of do what they need to do and just being able to control the game. And I think if Oregon can kind of do that, they can shorten the game, they can play more of the game that they want to play. I think it's a great point that you make, is who can play their game for longer.
Yeah.
Whoever can play their game for longer, whoever can stay in their scheme the longest, is probably going to win this game. And so, yeah, I'm riding with Washington. Have been, got to stick with them. But it's going to be a very exciting game. The last thing I'll say is, ABC, why is this not the 7:00 game? I mean, I know that we have Miami and North Carolina, which is still a top 25 matchup, but come on, it's a top 10 matchup. Come on, it's got to be the night game. It's got to be prime time.
Yeah, no. College football scheduling and TV contracts are always frustrating, especially Pac-12.
I know we don't like the Pac-12 right now, ESPN and ABC, but like, come on.
Yeah,
what are we doing?
Well, and let's say they flex it to a night game, they probably put it at 9 Central kickoff, and it would just be even more frustrating because then it's not done until midnight. But anyway,
some of those West Coast teams for the Big 12, I'm really not looking forward to those 9:00 kickoffs. I can't do it.
They can adjust something somewhere when it's on the West Coast, maybe moving those to the afternoons and whatnot. But anyway, gonna be a fantastic showdown. Top game of the week for sure. Make sure you tune in to that 2:30 Central, 12:30 Pacific time kickoff. We'll be rooting for the Huskies. And yeah, I think that's gonna wrap us up here. If you can see us, if we get it figured out, awesome. Waving around, showing my hands. But we appreciate you guys tuning in, and sorry that this episode's a little bit delayed more than normal. I hopefully am on the right track to getting my body and health together here to where we get back on schedule next week. But appreciate you guys tuning in. I said that already, but like, subscribe, follow, all the things. If it's on YouTube, I don't know what else is there. Comment. What would you like to see? What would you like to hear? Questions will be.
There's a like button.
Like button. Yeah. All the things. But we greatly appreciate it, and we'll see you guys on the next one.